Welcome. In this episode, the redemption of a skeptical professor and the power of one student to set the world on the path toward a brighter future. You'll meet Laura Ouillette, whose determination as an undergrad sparked in her professor, Irv Levy, a passion for green chemistry, and sent him on a 20-year mission to spread the word about this sustainable science. It's a mission he continues to this day. Welcome, Laura and Irv.
Thank you.
To set the stage, I'd like Irv to talk to you first and make sure everyone who's watching at least has a sense about what we're talking about when we talk about something called green chemistry. So Irv, as best you can, how would you define for an audience that may not be familiar with it, what green chemistry is?
Well, thanks. I'll give you my elevator pitch, which is basically the green chemistry is chemistry that is designed to be inherently safer for human health and the environment. And I mean, things can be accidentally safe, but when you include the word design, you have to have design criteria. And for us, the things that we got about 20 or 25 years ago were the 12 principles of green chemistry. And so by using the 12 principles of green chemistry, we can do things that are designed to be inherently safer for human health and the environment.
Wonderful. Thank you. And how does that play out, again, fairly briefly, if you could, in terms of our daily lives today, the things we use, how those things are made, the energy we get, all of that?
Well, that's a complicated question to do real quickly, but I guess I'll say this about it. Whenever you hear about chemistry on the news, it's usually because something is burning or something exploded or some town has been evacuated because of a chemical hazard that's taken place. And I guess the underlying principle of green chemistry is that there should be no more news stories like that. We can do all the things that chemists do, but we can do them in ways that have been designed to be safer, because we can't ever say that we won't have accidents. That's just an impossibility. But we can say that when the accidents happen, they'll be unlikely to cause harm to human health or the environment.
Thank you, Irvin. That's you. I think you hinted at something that I'll finish the story for folks. One event that was in the news this year was the train wreck in Ohio.
Right.
And as Irv led you folks, the idea was that there were chemicals on that train. A train wreck alone is bad, but a train wreck carrying those chemicals is what led to the really serious problems. And so the question becomes, why were those chemicals even on the train? No one just wants to carry around chemicals that can be bad for humans and the environment. They were there because they were used very specifically throughout different industrial processes to make the things we use in our lives.
Right.
And the whole thing about green chemistry is, how can we reinvent those processes? How can we reinvent the products that we're making with those processes so we don't even need those chemicals?
Right.
So we don't need chemicals that, when spilled off a train, are going to cause human health and environmental problems. So that in a medium-sized nutshell is what green chemistry is. And at least as a nice intro for folks who may not be familiar, it's really powerful. It's why this show exists, honestly, because of the potential and power of what it means for our future, sustainability wise, climate change wise, etc.
Right.
All right. So with green chemistry now on the table, we need to get to two people who I have helped to amplify the arc of green chemistry over the last 20 years. And Laura, it started with you as a sophomore at Gordon College in the academic year of 2000 to 2003, right?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so Laura, you were assigned by Irv in his chemistry class at Gordon College to do a research paper. Can you take it over from there, please?
Okay. Well, organic chemistry was one of the things that was a requirement for, actually, I'm a biology major with an environmental concentration. And when he presented us with this research project, it was, I don't remember your criteria exactly, but it was like, you have to pick a molecule and like dissect it down to how it all connects and works together, things like that. Or if you have a better idea, come to me and I'll say yes or no and approve it. So I was like, I don't want to do the whole humdrum thing that everybody else is doing. And I was like, I want to combine my chemistry with my biology somehow, if that's possible. So I came to you and I asked, hey, do you have any ideas how my environmental biology could make a chemistry research paper? And my memory, I'm going, this is what I remember. You reached in your closet and you handed me a pamphlet And it was, I don't know if it was this DVD, this is what I had in my stuff, or just some other pamphlet, and said, hey, I recently heard about this thing called green chemistry. Here's the pamphlet, read about it and see if you can make a research project out of it. And I'm like, so I don't know if you knew much about green chemistry at the time when you handed me that pamphlet, but I was like, okay. I started to read it and I became very interested in it, and I flew with it. Gave you my what would we
And
call
Laura,
not a
I'm going to
syllabus,
pause
but my
you there. Okay, I'm going to pause you there because I want to pick back up on the story. And so, folks watching, we're going to be unweaving this story for you. And the fun part is you're gonna see that there are some slightly different memories on either side. It'll be like sort of witnesses in a crime show where the witnesses have different memories of the events, not because they're on very different sides of this equation. Both have wonderful memories, but we're going to sort of play out this story as it happened on both sides of this. So, Laura, before I turn to Irv, you had mentioned, I think the key there was in your biology, there was an environmental biology degree you were pursuing. And so you, and not to put words in your mouth, but you wanted to hang on to your interest in the environment as you did this chemistry paper. Is that fair to say?
I wanted something that combined the best of both worlds, I guess you could say. So, I mean, I love chemistry, don't get me wrong, but he said we could choose something else other than just what the research paper said to do. So if we had another idea, to come to him. And so I was able to do something a little different. And I wanted to incorporate the environmental part of my biology to that.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So Irv, let's take from your perspective back in that moment of 2002 to 2003. Laura comes to you and says, hey, I want to add this environmental component and tether it to my environmental biology. You had a reaction at the time that you told me in our previous conversation.
Yeah, so the bottom line is the first milestone in this project was to propose a topic, and that was for everybody in the class. Everybody had to propose the topic because I had read a lot of papers over the years that were not really on track, and I don't like to read papers that aren't great. I like to read really good papers. So I wanted to try to steer them in a direction that I thought would be writing a good paper. So it starts with this meeting at my office where you propose a topic. And what I recall is Laura came in and mentioned the topic green chemistry. Now, I don't know if when I gave her that DVD, I did have that. I know why I gave it to her. I gave it to her because I had no interest in it. And so I said, you take it. I don't need it. And I had never watched it. And so maybe you'd like this. But anyway, I do remember when she said she wanted to do something about green chemistry or environment and chemistry, thinking to myself, oh, come on, go hug a tree and then pick a real topic. Like maybe something that is some molecule that's found in a clam or something like that, or a sponge. That would have been an interesting chemistry paper in my mind. But this environment thing, give me a break. That was my initial response to it. And so I might have given her that DVD as a way to sort of not roll my eyes at her. But I know that internally I was rolling my eyes.
And this is the part that folks, there's redemption on the way, I promise.
I hope.
Irv, you had described yourself in our previous conversation, wrapped up in that as a hard-boiled skeptic when presented with this concept of green chemistry.
Yeah, because the American Chemical Society had been sending me things like the DVD that Laura showed and videotapes, VHS videotapes and things like that. And every time I got one, I just put it aside. I still have most of them because I have, I just keep things. I'm a pack rat, but I never looked at them. I never watched them. And I was just kind of very skeptical about what does this whole thing mean? What do you mean green chemistry? I mean, I didn't understand what that meant at the time. And
what about it specifically were you sort of skeptical about? Like what, just briefly in terms of the chemistry you're doing, the chemistry you wanted your students to do, why were you skeptical at the time?
I guess the only answer to that question is I was ignorant. I knew nothing about it. And so I knew what organic chemistry was. I know what natural products chemistry is. And when you put a new qualifier in front of the word chemistry, like green, I didn't know what that meant. And so all I knew is that I had never been trained in anything called green chemistry. So it didn't sound to me like something real. It sounded to me like a slogan.
Well, and then that was the word you in our conversation you had hinted towards. You just weren't sure it was real chemistry, that it was
Right.
robust chemistry. Is that
Right.
fair?
Right. That's fair.
Okay. And we're going to come back and close the loop on that. So Laura, you're handed this CD that Irv gave you. Can you hold it up to the camera again if you have it? Because
I'm not sure if this is the exact one or if I got this at another conference.
No, I gave that to you.
Green chemistry. What's it called again?
Excuse me?
What's the title of it? Green chemistry meeting global challenges. All the folks at the ACS are going to be over the moon that this disc that created back then led to this. But so
I also had this in my office, but I didn't give you that because it was VHS and it was just it seemed like it's going to be harder to watch a VHS tape. But this was the other thing they sent me at the same time.
I remember seeing that. Yeah, I didn't watch the movie, but yeah.
All right, so Laura, you've heard, Irv, all right, rolling his eyes, thinking whatever, gives you this disc. And Irv, I think the challenge was that you'd given her was kind of like maybe, but you got to prove it.
Right. I basically said that I don't think you're going to be able to find. This is supposed to be a research paper where you're supposed to find lots of sources and then write a research paper like a review. And I said, I don't think you're going to be able to find anything. Why don't you take another week and come back with a different topic? Because I wasn't even going to penalize you for being a week late and coming up with a topic. It was sort of like you came up with this joke topic, but now I'll let you have another week, come up with a real topic, come back and tell me that you're going to look for some kind of chemical found in a sponge, and I'll go with it. That's fine, 100% fine.
Yeah.
But
all right.
Yeah.
So thank you, Irv. So all right, so Laura, so if you recall at that moment where Irv gave you the disc and sent you with a sort of tepid maybe, are you recalling sort of what you did to then find what you started to find?
Well, just for the record, I'd never heard of green chemistry until he gave me that disc. I wanted something environmental, like biodegradable. I might have used that word or something like that. And I remember one of the first things I saw after either watching this disc or starting to research green chemistry was I found out that they made paper plates that were biodegradable, but not only that, they were made from corn. Or some natural product that was a renewable resource. And that struck me right away. And I was like, ooh, I can go with this. And I thought you might have mentioned, well, you might have to take whatever chemical that is and do the research paper on that. But then you let me expound and go into more of the green chemistry. But that's kind of what I remember. I took the disc, I watched it, and then I just started researching it. And I spent a lot of days in Boston is it Northeastern College or one of the Boston colleges for their library that had all the books that Paul Anastas and John Warner had written on green chemistry. Spent a lot of time there.
Yeah.
So Laura, and I think what you watched the disc, and as you started to uncover some research and some papers on this that actually were out there, what were you thinking? Like, were the sparks starting to go off in terms of this is cool, this is wow?
I think one of the biggest takeaways from green chemistry that I originally had was that it wasn't going to be its own field of chemistry. Green chemistry was originally created to make chemists rethink how they do chemistry in the future. And that to me was a big part of it. It was more of this is a new field of chemistry, but its goal was to eventually kind of dissipate and disappear. But now it's just a big thing still, which I think is really interesting. And I don't know if you want to flesh that out, but it's just, I just really liked the concepts behind it, where we're using the renewable resources, preserving the earth that way, and then making products that aren't going into landfills. I mean, that we're biodegrading and other things. And one of the other ones I saw in the video, or something else that sparked, was this paint that they were painting boats with that was non-toxic, so it wasn't going to pollute the oceans while it was there to keep the things that hook on the boats off.
Barnacles, there
you go.
Yeah. Wonderful. And folks, what Laura was talking about, this idea that, and it has, you're right, Laura, both green chemistry still is, and sustainable chemistry, related and by other name, they are still very much, as you said, a thing. They're a force in the world. I think the idea since its founding in the early 90s has been, we hope one day that no one will need to say the word green chemistry, because it will just be how everyone does chemistry.
Right.
That people will start from the get-go just thinking about the effects long-term and redesigning before we get to those problems.
Yep.
I will tell you, speaking for everyone I've talked to over the years and now, is that still very much the hope. The hope is that it someday the term green, the term sustainable will just disappear from this, and it'll simply be how chemistry is done.
Right.
Not there yet. Getting closer, and that plays into where Irv's journey goes pretty soon in this story, actually. So we'll come back to our little story here. All right. So Irv, back to you. Laura goes away, does some research, starts to find some stuff, comes back to you, and in your memory, what happens next?
She came back a week later, as I asked her to come with her new idea. And instead of coming with a new idea, she came with a folder full of things that she had copied at Boston University when she went into the library there. And I thought, oh no. So you're still going to go with this idea? Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, the reality is I just didn't know anything about it. And I felt uncomfortable knowing that I was going to be not supervising, but evaluating this project about something that I was really not knowledgeable in. But she was determined to go with it. And so I said, well, you've done the work, so I'm not going to tell you to throw that away. Go ahead and write your stupid paper about stupid green chemistry. And I'll tell you, I know. And I'm just telling you the same things that I've told hundreds of people at lectures I've given. And I'll even tell you this. I'm not proud of this, but it's true. I thought to myself, well, at least she's not a chemistry major. So you're a biology major with this environmental thing. So, oh, well, so this is a loss of a real project for somebody, but at least she's not a chemistry major. And I'm sorry that I thought that, but that is what I thought.
And folks watching, first, Irv, I really honestly want to thank you for your just honesty here and letting us know, your thoughts at the time and the skepticism, because I think it plants the important foundation for this story. And one piece of which is, Laura, what that I love, and we talked about this before we started recording, is the effect you had as an undergraduate on this arc, almost without even knowing it.
Right.
I had no clue.
I think is really honestly kind of charming. But I will say to any undergraduate student or graduate student out there watching this, or high school student, or maybe even a middle school student, I think all of you watching this, you may be having a bigger effect on your teachers than without even trying, by as Laura did, persisting, having an idea, finding the information, backing it up, and kind of sticking to your roots of, this is something I want to do, and here's the information that supports why I want to do it. That's really powerful. And Laura, you did that again, kind of without even knowing that you were impacting a system. And so to all the students who might be watching this, imagine if that's the potential of a student doing that simply by, yes, I want to do this, and here's information. Imagine what's possible if you're now thinking, I want to change the system, and we're going to accelerate this a little bit more with that in mind. And I bring that up because there have been, and there are going to be many more stories here in Green Chem Essential about students who've done just that, who've come into universities, high schools, and middle schools with, here's what green chemistry is, and here's why we need to learn it, and here's why this institution needs to change, and then it happens. And it's the power, and I will tell you finally, before I get off my soapbox, to all the students watching this, the number of senior faculty members and researchers and educational institution leaders that I have talked to who said the power that these students have to alter the course of these institutions in really wonderful ways is tremendous. And so
it's remarkable.
Yeah. All right. So, but tethering it back to the story at hand, I'll get off my soapbox now. And Irv,
it's a good soapbox.
So you, or Irv or Laura. So, where do we go next? So, Irv,
Okay, I think Laura probably went back to work and started trying to draft her paper. I'm guessing. What I did was I was already registered to go to the March 2003 ACS national meeting in New Orleans. I go to almost all the ACS national meetings. And when I went to the one in New Orleans in March of 2003, I remember very much that one of the first things that was on the event of the national meeting, it's a huge meeting with tens of thousands of people are going to be there. But the program, the very first thing on the program was on Sunday morning, there was going to be a green chemistry in education symposium. And I thought, will this stuff leave me alone? Why can't I stop hearing about green chemistry? But the reality is I became more interested because suddenly I had a vested interest in learning about green chemistry. And that vested interest was named Laura because she cared about it. And so I had to learn something about it so that I could have a conversation with her about it. And so I decided to go to that symposium. And at that symposium, there were speakers like John Warner and Paul Anastas and Jim Hutchison and all these different people, Mary Kirchhoff, all these people who are very, very influential in the development of green chemistry. And it's sort of like, I always say that it was kind of like going to a tent revival where there was an evangelist speaking. And it's like, I see the light, I got it, I understood. So for me, green chemistry meant nothing until that day, except that it was an annoyance that Laura kept mentioning.
So we talked about, and this becomes a fundamental part of it, Irv. So, we talked earlier about how you just didn't think it was real. It wasn't robust, real chemistry.
Right.
There was something in that event at ACS changed your mind as a chemistry professor looking for real, robust chemistry.
Right.
What changed?
Well, I just heard these people like John and Paul talking about actual projects, things that were actually being done to reduce the impact on human health and the environment of chemistry that people were doing and why it mattered. And it really does matter. And it's sort of like when it was described and really explained to me that way, it was sort of like, well, of course, this is what I've always wanted to do. I mean, who wouldn't want to do this? Who wouldn't want to do things in their daily life that are going to make the world a better place? And that's really what green chemistry is about using chemistry to make the world a better place. And I just didn't see that beforehand. But when they were starting to unpack their actual examples of things that they had done, it certainly suddenly seemed like, well, this is an obvious thing. This is what I need to be doing. And so that was that big transfer. And really, I left that meeting going up to the front because I had heard about a workshop that was going to be held at the University of Oregon that summer to train people on the use of green chemistry. It's called the Green Chemistry and Education Workshop. And Jim Hutchison was one of the leaders of that. And so I went up to the front afterwards and shook his hand and said, I need to come to your workshop. He said, well, I think we're pretty full for this year. But I said, no, but I need to come to your workshop. And it was just like I was like, completely zoned in on this thing. It was just like I couldn't possibly not go to the workshop now that I had heard about this. And
that's fantastic. And I'm going to interrupt you there for just a second, because I think you hit on something that's this idea of it's once you sort of learn about the potential of it, and as you said, that it's based in real chemistry, that there's this sort of obviousness to it. There's sort of course, this is how we would do things. And then it's, why isn't everyone doing it this way? Right. And we'll come back to that. All right. So Laura, so you've gotten the green light to go ahead with this. Any more like sort of your journey through that research, through the papers you were seeing, what was occurring to you as you were doing this project? Any more?
Well, I think part of what happened was my paper, I have it right here, actually, Irv. I have a copy.
Green
chemistry, environmentally friendly. You have it? Oh my gosh.
I have it framed on my office.
Oh my word. That's hilarious. Oh, that's right. The abstract from our ACS conference. Is that what that is?
No, this is, I don't know. I thought it was your paper. What's the front page of your paper say?
Green chemistry, environmentally friendly chemistry.
Yep, that's what this says.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. Anyways, so for me, that was more.
Just underscore that everyone's watching this. This professor has framed in his office 20 years later, the front page, Laura, of your research paper. Like, lest you think, yeah. All right. So wow. Laura, you were saying.
Okay, so basically I did this paper. I introduced what green chemistry was, what it was all about, why it was good, and then I went to like the presidential wars, things like that, and the tools and metrics. I'm just reading through my syllabus really right here, what I wrote it on, my excuse me, my outline, not my syllabus. And then Irv really jumped on board after reading my paper and then attending these workshops and things like that. So then the next year, I'm done with organic chemistry. Back to my biology stuff. That's all I needed. I think all I needed was analytics too. That was all that was required for my major. But Irv and I had a chat some point, I don't even remember when, and I decided, hey, how much more do I need to get a minor in chemistry? This stuff's kind of cool. So he's like, well, you really only need this many more credits, and if you do a research project for me, I'll give you the credits, and you'll have a chemistry minor. So at that point, he decided to advise me through my research, and I chose green chemistry. And I think it was mostly, I kind of narrowed it down to green chemistry metrics. And so that was for my junior and my senior year. I worked on that. And throughout that time, I attended a different symposium where I met someone and they got me into a really awesome internship. And that's where I did a lot of my research actually during my internship in the summer. And then from that research, I formulated a poster, but then also a presentation. And I don't know what magic you worked, but I was a presenter at the American Chemical Society my senior year as an undergrad. And I had the founders of green chemistry sat in on my lecture.
Yes.
What in the world? I was
very clearly.
That I was star shocked, but at the time I was like, whoa, don't you guys already know this stuff?
Right.
But
so Laura, just to encapsulate that for everyone. So going in your sophomore year to not knowing anything about it, to diving into this, doing the research, learning about it, writing the paper, and then getting this next kick with Irv to get the minor, landed you as one of the speakers at a conference on green chemistry.
Yep.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, I want to come back, Laura, also to something you mentioned it very quickly, and we probably don't want to go into like distinct detail or who led you there, that kind of thing. But I'd love it. It's important, I think, for folks to hear where this internship related to green chemistry was, because that says a lot.
How
the summer internship?
Where was my internship?
Yeah,
that's the awesome thing is I landed a summer internship with Pfizer, one of the biggest chemical producing companies in the world.
Can I jump in on this for just 1 second?
Sure.
So this is another change that Laura caused, because the reality is she went to speak to Buzz Q, who was a vice president at Pfizer, and said because he came to Gordon to give a lecture, and she met him after the lecture. And
it was actually Bridgewater State. I went down with my biology professor to Bridgewater State, and I met him there.
Okay. And she said, I want to come to do an internship on green chemistry at Pfizer. And there was no green chemistry internship program at Pfizer, but he created one because of Laura's question. So again, the power of one.
Yeah, I didn't even know that this internship was, they had this whole summer internship program throughout the company, but you have to like apply for it and go through all these hoops and jumps and things. And Buzz just offered me an internship and said, here. And I was actually away studying abroad for my other minor. I have a French minor, so I went to France for a semester. So my junior year, second semester, I was gone. And then I came back and I went right to Pfizer. And then I finished my research my senior year. So.
Among the many reasons that I love this piece of the story is for anyone out there, again, lest anyone, be where Irv was at the time, which is this stuff's just not real. Again, this is Pfizer. This is an organization that, its livelihood depends on real chemistry, on robust chemistry. And at the time, I don't pretend to know everything, but I know enough that at the time, Pfizer was one of the pharmaceutical companies that was taking at least a few people in Pfizer, the wonderful Buzz Q leading it, I think, taking a very hard and quick look at green chemistry because it offered a way to reinvent systems that honestly had the environmental benefit, but also very much had efficiency and economic impacts on how they did their business. So again, that's a whole nother story, but suffice it to say that at the time, is green chemistry real or not? Was it robust or not? Well, Pfizer was interested in it, and they weren't alone at that point by a long shot. So but for the purposes of our story, that's, I think, an important little exclamation point. And here again, Laura, I think without quite knowing the ripples you were causing, alerting BuzzQ to like, oh yeah, we're gonna change up how Pfizer does our internships to make a green chemistry one. That's fantastic.
I had no idea at that time either that was happening. And Buzz was not even at Pfizer the entire summer I was there. I don't know if he had just retired. His office was there. I found it, but that whole wing of the building was empty. Okay. He actually put me under someone else that was, I guess, interested in green chemistry. And while I was there, I worked on my whole internship was basically, we have to do a poster presentation at the end. Every intern does about their research. And mine was on creating a toolkit for chemists based on using metrics and things, and how to look at the process of how we make a chemical and take into consideration everything we're using and what we're choosing to use to do these processes, and with the end goal of the LCA, the life cycle analysis, looking at that. So we want you to grab water and use air pressure and not just grab this nasty solvent or catalyst, and trying to get the best yields that we can get, but without having to scrub it and then pay to take care of all this nasty stuff at the end, and in the end saving the company tons of money. So, and also helping the environment.
Maybe Buzz has that framed somewhere. Who knows? We'll ask him. All right. So thank you, Laura. And you, in the course of that, you just gave another, again, a little sort of encapsulated piece of what green chemistry is all about. All right. So now we come, folks, to the redemption part I spoke to.
Right.
Irv, because what followed, again, the power of one, as Irv said, Laura, the fire you lit. This is where the power really kicks in, because Irv, as you said, you saw the light, and without, again, going through all the details, that led you over the past 20 years. You've done a few things, several things related to green chemistry that took this renewed interest into a whole new levels. Can you tell us?
Sure. I think maybe the first thing I did was I leveraged my involvement with the American Chemical Society. I was on the program committee for the national meetings in the Division of Chemical Education. And first thing I did was create the first, as far as I know, the first green chemistry symposium at an ACS national meeting. And that's the one that Laura spoke at. And I don't know, for people that are watching, it's extremely rare for an undergraduate to speak at a national meeting. It's not uncommon for them to present a poster at the poster session, but to actually stand at the podium in a room of 500 people and then talk about what she's been doing, that was a really big deal, and something I've admired for many years. And
scary.
So I'm sure it was scary, right? So one of the things that I also did then was being more involved with the program committee. We created a sort of an ongoing green chemistry presence at the ACS national meeting. So the people knew that at every ACS national meeting, there was going to be a green chemistry symposium. And because the reality is, the reason I didn't know it was real is I had never heard about it before. So what do? You go out there where the educators are and tell them about it. And so we created these symposia, and it started off sort of small, but now it's continuing. It's been going now for some 20 years at almost every ACS national meeting. I won't say every, because I don't know this for certain, but I think almost every ACS national meeting has had a podium presentation session for an oral presentation session for green chemistry theory and practice, which is the title of John's book, John and Paul's book. And so that's what we sort of co-opted that as the title for this ongoing symposium series.
And folks, I want to, Irv, just so folks know, for anyone watching this who doesn't know what ACS is, ACS, it stands for the American Chemical Society, and it's essentially it's the professional society in the U.S. That represents or is made up of chemists, be they academics, chemists working out in industry, etc. And I think, or correct me if I'm wrong, that it's one of the largest, if not the largest, scientific professional societies in the U.S.
Well, it's actually was the largest professional society in the world. I'm not sure that that's still true, but that with over 160,000 members, I believe it may be.
Yeah, and forgive me, Irv, you may, and I actually worked there with the Green Chemistry Institute many years ago, so I should know the answer to this. The membership not limited to U.S. chemists. Is
Oh,
that
no.
Right? Yeah.
No,
Okay.
there's many international members. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
And so that was my first way of trying to get involved in this, because I knew that there was a good story to be told here, but we had to get the story in the hands of the people that needed to hear it. People like me that were standing in front of students, not knowing what they were talking about, and so that was a really important portion to me of getting involved in this community. And then I got involved with Beyond Benign. I'm wearing my Beyond Benign shirt today. So Beyond Benign was the organization. It's like the premier organization in the world for green chemistry education dissemination. So I got involved with Beyond Benign and became a part of their board, and tried to find any avenue I could to get the word out there about green chemistry to a lot of people. So that involved going into museums, going into community houses, places where we could just, I even gave a seminar about green chemistry at a rock concert venue where they had people coming in to come for lectures too. And so it turns out that anytime that there was a place that I could come and, what I always say is, sing the green chemistry song, I would do that to try to make sure that people understood what it was. And so there wouldn't be as many ignorant people like me walking around anymore. And so,
as you said, you put it in terms of a tent revival, and you saw the light. And
right.
At this point, you have become a full blown, or I mean, at that point in time,
Yes.
An evangelist for
Exactly.
for
Right.
the cause.
Right.
Now you and folks again watching Beyond Benign, and for full disclosure, Beyond Benign is a sponsor of this episode, but for a very good reason. That there's this piece of green chemistry. There's gonna be a lot of shows that I do with Green Chem Essential that are about green chemistry out in the world at Pfizer and at different startups and established companies around the world, things that governments are doing. But a critical piece of this is what's happening at the educational level in our grade schools, in our high schools, and our universities to teach green chemistry. And Beyond Benign, as Irv said, has been a leader in advancing that cause. At the risk of stating the obvious, or just at a high level, why this focus on green chemistry at the educational level?
Well, I guess just because, as I said, it's the educators that are going to be talking to the Lauras in their classrooms. And if we can't be explaining to educators what green chemistry is, they're not going to be talking about it to anybody else. But if you can explain it well, then I don't know why anybody would not want to do it.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, it's just going to be chemistry without the qualifier in the future when we start all doing it.
Yeah, and we can't expect the chemists at the Pfizers, or again, you name the institution, the organization, the company, the startup. We can't expect them to be reinventing our systems as we need to for sustainability or climate change if they're not being taught the skills of green chemistry throughout their education.
Yeah.
And then also, and again, this is the topic of other stories, but all the people at these different institutions who work with the chemists, who help design, help determine what's going to be created or not created, what's going to be used or not used. There's a lot of green chemistry education that's reaching people like you, Laura, who are not chemistry majors, but who will come out of those educational situations knowing what's possible and what can change going forward. And that, so that you have teams now at different institutions who together can create this change. Laura, any thoughts you have at this point? I have the story is going to turn back to you in a moment for what's coming next for you. But as we've been talking about this, any thoughts on what was happening at the time, or your thoughts now on green chemistry, or this idea of change in that discipline?
Not really. I'm just glad that it's still going and that it's getting into chemist mind. My whole goal with my research was to retrain the way chemistry is done, and just to show the world that Pfizer is not a big bad chemical company, and neither is Cargill Dow and stuff. They are trying to put forth these green chemical principles and trying to use renewable resources, and just, they take a really bad rap. And they are trying, and they've been trying for a long time now, to use the principles that are out there to do things the right way.
Yeah, if I can jump off of that, I think that there's no chemist in the world that I can imagine would get up in the morning and think, well, I'm going to go do some harm to human health and the environment now. But the reality is, if we don't have that toolbox of things that can be done more safely, somebody's got a goal they have to reach, and they're going to use whatever tools are available to get there. And so that's why we need educators to be involved here, because the reality is we need a whole workforce full of people that are going to be trained in this way, sort of like an Apollo project to sort of figure out how can we get everybody to the moon. And the moon here is doing chemistry in ways that are safer for human health and the environment. And we can do it, but we need thousands and thousands of people to be involved, not just dozens. And so getting all the Lauras in the world out there that are students interested, and then maybe off to grad school, and then, you know, into places where they can go to companies like Pfizer and so forth and figure out how to reinvent the way we do things so that we are doing things safer for human health and the environment, just because it's easier to do. I mean, that's the bottom line. We want green chemistry to be as efficient as the unsafe methods of the past. We want it to be cost effective, and we want it to work as well or even better. If you've got all three of those things, then you're really talking a win, because people will do it if for no other reason than it's less expensive or it gives them a better result, even if they don't care about human health and the environment, which honestly we all do. Some people are more dramatically involved in that than others, but
yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Irv. And folks watching, I want to come back to something Laura said, because it's an important point, and there's a nuance here that I think is important to recognize. Because Laura, you mentioned, you know, the Pfizer and Cargill, the different chemical companies out there, the pharmaceuticals and chemical companies. There has been activity throughout the course of green chemistry since the early 90s that I think is important to recognize, which is engaging. You know, any company we can imagine has gotten themselves in trouble at some point with, you know, with doing things in ways that can cause harm, that have raised red flags, that have had people protesting them, however we want to put it. But what I've long admired about the green chemistry community is we will still engage with those companies. It's not like you can't cut, because these companies are the companies making, like it or not, and some people, you know, however you want to look at it, they are making the things that we use in our daily lives. And if we're looking for change, if we're looking to alter the future, you've got to engage with the companies that are doing this stuff, and recognize that a company is not a monolith, that within those companies there are people who do want change. And so this idea, as Laura said, of that there are seeds in most places that want change, and can we engage with them and make sure that going forward this idea takes seed as widely as possible in as many institutions as possible, existing, new, large, small, etc. That's I think a long-term goal. Irv, you've been wanting to say something here on this, I think.
No, I'm just listening to what you're saying and nodding along, because I'm in agreement everything you've said.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. All right, Irv, one more question for you, and then Laura will wrap up with you. Okay, I think. So Irv, it's not just that you've sort of, you know, you've gotten into talking a lot about green chemistry with Beyond Benign. You were involved, I think still are involved, but led the effort for a while, something called the Green Chemistry Commitment. And I say this not as an advertisement, folks. I say that because it's kind of the next step of, you got Laura influencing Irv to as a professor to become, you know, really into the idea of doing and advancing green chemistry. Irv now with Beyond Benign and something called the Green Chemistry Commitment, taking it to the next level. Irv, just briefly, could you tell us what the commitment is and your activity there?
Well, sure. And I think it's really important to realize that each educator has the ability to have so much impact on so many people, because of the fact that we deal with not just the hundreds of students that we have, but also the hundreds and thousands of people that they interact with. And so it's just a really important thing that we get green chemistry into the hands of students. And the Green Chemistry Commitment Project is basically a project that says to colleges and universities, if you're going to have a chemistry major, why don't you talk about green chemistry? And, really, it's a very simple concept of saying, here's some things that you'd probably want to do if you're wanting to teach your students about green chemistry, and let us give you resources. And when you say you're not trying to do a commercial here or something, well, that's a real thing, because green chemistry commitment is not something that anybody is making any money from. It's something that is freely done, and nobody has to pay to be part of it or anything like that. But your school says, yes, sign me up. We want to be doing green chemistry with our students. And it's basically your way of saying, we're going to teach them something about the theory of green chemistry, which revolves around the 12 principles. And we're going to teach them something about the practice of green chemistry in their careers, so that when they are out there in the world, they're being like Laura, and they're bringing this to Laura is a prime example of this. People that are not going to just sit there and say, why don't I do this really bad experiment, use this really bad chemical, because that's what the boss said to do. But instead, Laura's going to go into the boss and say, isn't there a better way to do this? And we want people to be trained to have that ability. And there's also some other things in there, like learning some about toxicology, learning something about how to do it in the laboratory. So there's sort of 4 legs that the green chemistry commitment stands on as pillars, but nobody's able to do them all when they start, because the reality is we're all learning how to do this. So what I do, I've gone to a number of different colleges and universities and other venues to talk about this, so that people can hear what the green chemistry commitment has done for my career and what it can do for their careers too, because the reality is it's going to bring people like Laura out of the woodworks. And when you find those people, suddenly you find yourself propelled in directions you had no idea you were going to go. And that's what the green chemistry commitment is really about. And I'm really, really excited that there's now people all over the world that are part of this. And I would say, to some extent, that that's Laura's fault, because she was one of the ones that got this all started. And
and I want to put a cap on that with, I think, am I right now? And you may know the exact number, but I think the number of institutions at this point that have sort of signed on to the commitment. And again, folks, in a nutshell, it's institutions saying, yes, we will institutionalize green chemistry education in our chemistry curriculum. This is colleges and universities around the world. And I think the number, Irv, now is at about 130 something and counting. Is that correct?
It's even higher. It's in the 150 to 160 range right now. And they're all over the world. They're in Africa, they're in Europe, they're in Australia, they're in the United States, they're everywhere. And so all over the world now, people are starting to teach their chemistry students about green chemistry. And one of the really important things about it is it doesn't matter where you are in the process. You could be as much of a newbie as I was 20 years ago and still get yourself going, because the green chemistry commitment is not about saying, I'm perfect, I do everything perfectly for my students, but it's saying, I want to get someplace, and I'm going to have an entire community behind me that's going to help to guide me there. And that's what is really special about the green chemistry commitment. It's not about trying to look over your shoulder and saying, oh, you're doing something wrong. It's saying, what do you want to do and how can I help? And that's what that community is all trying to do.
And Laura, this is where we're going to come back to you, because first of all, just to make it abundantly clear to you in case it hasn't already settled, I hope both as a there's the weight of it, but also it's a wonderful weight it on your shoulders, which is the fact that you lit a spark in Irv 20 years ago that's led him to be an instrumental player in an organization that has now, again, 150 and counting institutions saying, yes, we will do green chemistry. And each of those institutions, if you start to do the math, it's, hundreds of students a year getting what you insisted Irv give you 20 years ago, which is some, an insight into green chemistry. So, the pebble you dropped in the pond, the butterfly wing that you waved 20 years ago, it's pretty astounding, I think.
It would have been hard to imagine where this was going to go.
Yeah. So does that surprise you, Laura?
I was completely shocked, honestly, when you all reached out to me. 20 years later, my research comes back to be this big thing. And I was like, I thought you gave me that because you wanted to learn more about green chemistry, not that you were a skeptic. I had no clue. I
I was
thought you just wanted me to do the research for you so you could learn about it.
no, I was just cleaning out my office.
That is, I'm just speechless. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize my stubbornness
And
got me so far.
and you know what I think
Persistent
all
is
the
what you
time?
called it.
What I
What?
think about all the time is, what if you had taken my advice and come back with some silly thing about the chemicals that are found in a sponge or something like that? I would have been, oh, go, you're good, you're good, you're good. And all the things that I've been doing these past 2 decades would have been lost to me. So I can't thank you enough.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So
That
can I be a
moment
chem
of,
major now?
Yes.
that moment of again, whether you knew it or not, Laura, that moment of sort of persistence at the time, like, no, this is what I want to do.
Mhm.
You know, there was, Irv's future was resting on a knife's edge, and you pushed it
Right.
toward redemption. So, now, Laura, the epilogue that I wanted to finish with, I think, is this, because folks, again, not to advertise for them, but it's important. It's important out there as we talk about green chemistry and education, which is that in addition to the green chemistry commitment, Beyond Benign's sort of foundational offerings are resources for educators, offering, curriculum materials, syllabi, et cetera, for educators at all levels to bring green chemistry into their classrooms.
Right.
Laura, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when we spoke before, you spoke that you're going to be getting back into teaching, and with thanks to this full circle element of Irv's involvement and those beyond benign materials. Could you?
Well, currently I homeschool my children. And when I first started homeschooling, I was part of a co-op and I was teaching science. And I was just pulling curriculum out of thin air, seriously, because it was just a co-op. It wasn't your full class you were taking, and it was for grades, I think 2 through 8 is what I was teaching. We did a lot of STEM, and I tried to do a lot of hands-on, getting kids engaged and excited about science. That was my goal. I'm not currently teaching right now at a co-op. I'm still continuing to homeschool. But once my kids are finished homeschooling, or if they ever go back to school, I don't know. If I got into teaching, this would be something I would love to use. I would love to teach biology and chemistry, which is, it's just fun for me. I really enjoy it. And I hope my love for these subjects rubs off on the kids. That would be my goal. But if I was to teach chemistry somewhere, I would be reaching out to Irv. I'd be like, hey, what you got for me? What curriculum can I use to inspire these kids?
And those resources, I think that, because it does sound a little bit like an ad, just want to point out that all those resources are freely available. So it's like amazing resources that are out there in a format that's most usable by the people that are going to be the end users. And it's, Beyond Benign gives it away. And so, it's like we really get the green chemistry. We just don't get the how to turn it into money, I guess, because, we should be selling these things, but we're not. And I'm really joking when I say that. I'm really glad that they have sponsors that make it possible for them to produce all this amazing material and make it freely available to the world, because that's what the world needs. They need these resources, and you're not going to be likely to go after them to buy them if you don't even know what it's about at the beginning.
Yeah. And folks, there at the end of this video, and in the paragraphs above or below, wherever this video appears, there will be links offered to access these things that we're talking about. Well, I think we can wrap up our story now, because we've brought it sort of from 20 years ago into the present, and indeed into the future. Laura and Irv, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for sharing this wonderful story. There's really no other way to put it, of an interaction and what that interaction has led to. Really, really cool stuff. Any closing thoughts from either of you before we sign off and say goodbye?
I guess my only closing thought would be, I'm glad that you didn't understand how skeptical I was about what you were doing, and that you followed your heart.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you for making chemistry fun, because there's so many classes you have to take in college, and some of them you want to snooze through, but then you get to that professor that's just like, oh, I want to be in this guy's class forever. And you were one of those. So
thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, that's a nice note to end on. So we'll end there. Again, Laura and Irv, thank you very much for your time on this. And for everyone watching, I hope this lights some inspiration in anyone who might be watching this as well.